Welcome back to the Wishing We Were Fishing podcast. The podcast where we wish we were fishing, but instead we're recording a fishing podcast. In the second episode of the podcast, we're going to be discussing the full story of my first 2-foot brown trout of the year, how Andrew managed to catch 30 fish in a single hole, and my Oregon bull trout trip on a budget. If you enjoy it, please leave a like and a comment over on YouTube and leave a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Alright, let's get into the second episode of Wishing We Were Fishing. Listen, dude, I'm tired. I've been fishing for like 3 days straight. Okay, fine. Alright guys, welcome back to another podcast. So, my name's John Hardman, and this is Andrew.
And I'm so cool.
Okay.
What was that voice?
Listen, dude, I can't deal with this right now. I cannot. Okay, do we have to introduce ourselves every single time?
No.
Well, whatever.
We could just say, just in case there's like a guest or something.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my name's John Hardman, and this is my brother Andrew Hardman. And welcome back to another episode of Wishing We Were Fishing podcast. Because we actually came up with a name this time. In the last podcast, we didn't even know what it was going to be called, but today we have finally successfully named it. Actually, we did it like a week ago, but it's been like a month since we've recorded any podcast whatsoever. But we're finally back and finally took time to actually start a new podcast, or not start a new podcast, make another podcast episode after I finally, after a month, just edited the first episode. So we're trying to get caught up here,
and hopefully these should come out. It's pretty bad. Because I was just about to say something about you saying like 3 times from that first sentence, and then I come in and within 4 words I say
Dude, listen, we're not professionals, all right?
Hopefully we put these out a bit more there I go again a bit more frequently than this time lapse that we've had between the two this last one and the one we're currently recording, just because it should be kind of like it should be a weekly occurrence. We'll just have to like pick a day out of our schedule and just be like, okay, every Tuesday at 6:00 we're doing this, unless you're dying and or on some trip, and then we can plan around that. So
yeah, I think the first podcast we were talking about all these trips we had planned, and all the trips are done, like long gone and done, and the videos have already been posted for all of them. So it's been a minute since we recorded one of these, and
we don't want it to be like that either. We want it to be up to date and not, we talked about that a month ago when we've already done all that.
Yeah, I agree.
A lot more up to date. So it'll change from like now on, I think. It's just that first one we were not
hopefully
too hot.
So one thing that I have done in the month since the last podcast is I've made an executive decision. I did not ask Andrew about this, but I decided that we were going to change the format of the podcast and do stories first instead of doing questions first, because I feel like every podcast known to man does questions first. And a lot of times I find that like to be the most boring section of the podcast. And then we started, I called Andrew, and Andrew was like, no, I actually like questions the most out of some podcasts. So leave a comment somewhere on YouTube or wherever you're even allowed to leave comments, and let us know if you want us to do questions first or last. But for today, we're going to do them last because I don't know. That's what I decided to do.
Sorry, I was thinking of something as you were saying that, and I didn't know if I should say it in the podcast or not. But I was gonna say my idea of the stories is for them to be so good that, which I don't know if any of our 2 listeners here have ever heard the campfire stories from the Meat Eater book.
Oh yeah,
but that is a story right there, and that's what I'm expecting John to tell me right now.
Yeah, I was thinking about editing that last podcast kind of like in the Meat Eater Campfire Stories like editing style. And I started to do it, and then I realized how much work it was going to be. And I was like, man, I don't want this podcast to be something where I have to edit it for a week to get it live, because ideally it would be somewhat easy to edit and like put out. So anyways, long story short, we're going to do questions at the end of this podcast, and that may or may not change from here on out. But all right, I guess let's get into it. The first story I wanted to tell is just a story that happened to me actually really recently. And I haven't told Andrew the story at all. So Andrew's going to be hearing this his first time as along with you guys, which I thought would be like a more interesting way to tell the story rather than to just like tell a story to you guys that Andrew already knows, like the plot twist to and all that fun stuff. So this story starts... Ready? Give me a drum roll. Okay, so we're never going to do that again. But
was that too loud?
This story... Okay, I'm just going to start the story. This story starts, I think this was like 3 weeks ago. I went fishing with my buddy William, who's the same guy I went to Oregon with. And we committed to throwing streamers all day on this section of river that I consider one of my home waters. We've been fishing it for years and years and years and years, and we really enjoy fishing it. And I just wanted to throw streamers all day. Will was down. He was like, yeah, I'll throw streamers all day too. And essentially we chuck streamers for like 8 or 10 hours. And I only caught one fish in 8 or 10 hours, and it was like a 21 inch brown. So I was pretty happy with it. But at the very end of the day, I was fishing through this stretch of water, and I was actually throwing a streamer that Andrew tied. And I was fishing through the stretch of water that I knew had fish in it, but it wasn't really a good day of fishing. And I come up to this hole, chuck the streamer up into the middle of the hole, get like one strip in, and this really big brown trout comes and just wails on the streamer. I mean, just like rolls, goes crazy. I set the hook into it and actually foul hooked it. I don't remember if it was on the pec fin or just somewhere like on the bottom of the chin or something like that. And for those of you who don't know, when you foul hook a brown trout and you don't have a hook in their mouths, they become really difficult to fight. So I'm sitting there like fighting this fish, and I was like yelling for Will, and Will comes running back, and he's like getting ready to net the fish for me. But it's like, I don't really have head control over the fish because it's not hooked properly. And eventually I get the fish. It kind of gets a little bit tired, and I get the fish towards the bank, and Will's like behind me to my left. And I'm like, I'm just going to net the fish. Because like, why would I like try to swing the fish past me to get to where Will's netting? You know, it just didn't make sense in my mind. Plus, another little bit of context for this is that I was exhausted. I'd gotten like 0 sleep the last 2 nights. My wife had gotten sick and threw up all night one night. So I'd gotten like 1 hour of sleep one night, and then the next night I didn't get any sleep either. So I was running on like 0 sleep, which I think is part of the reason for my poor decision making in this instance. But I thought, I'm just going to net this fish. Like, why swing it to Will? So I went to net the fish, and of course, right as my net goes underneath the fish, you know, as I always do, it kicks really hard. And I tried to swing up and like net the fish, and the streamer got stuck on the net, and then the fish rolls and flops, of course, gets out of the net, and then the streamer pops and it swims away. And Will just looked at me and he was like, "You are an idiot." Like, he was like, "Why'd you even do that?" And I was like, "I don't know, dude." He gave me crap for like an hour after that. He was like, "Man, we could have had a really big brown in the net, but no, someone had to mess up a net job." Which, fair enough. And honestly, I don't know about you, Andrew, but I think it's been a long time since I've royally screwed up a net job like that. Like, it's been a minute. We've netted enough fish at this point that it feels like I've gotten pretty good at it. I can consistently net fish. But for some reason that time, like, my brain short circuited and I just didn't net the fish very well. And also it was foul hooked. So the net, like, when I didn't do a very good net job, since the streamer was on the outside of the fish, it got caught on the net pretty easily and popped.
And that's like the worst thing that you want to do or like, that's everybody's nightmare when you go to net a fish, is getting the hook from either a streamer or a nymph stuck in the net, because you almost always lose the fish when that happens.
I was just thankful at that point that it was my fish that I had screwed up the net job on and not Will's, because like, at least if it's your own fish, you're like, whatever, you can beat yourself up about it if you want. But like, if I'd lost someone else's fish like that, I would have cried. So I'm glad that it was my fish. But then afterwards, I kind of like was like, I gaslighted myself into believing that the fish wasn't all that big. I was like, he's probably like 20, 21 inches. And Will's like, yeah, sure, buddy. 20 inches, whatever you say, he went along with it. And then like fast forward a week. At the end of the day, then we'd caught like a 120-inch fish, and then I lost that fish, and I was upset about it, but it is what it is. You just move on. So then fast forward a week, the weather, for whatever reason, was super warm. I mean, I'm talking like the weather was almost 80 degrees, which was the warmest day we'd had all year long. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but the water was really clear and like kind of average. It wasn't low, but like about average for this time of the year. And I was like, you know what? I've never tried nymphing that, like any of that stretch of water that me and Will had fished. And we moved quite a bit of fish. Even though I didn't catch them, we moved a couple fish. And I was like, it'd be fun to try and nymph it. And one thing I learned fishing down at like some of the tailwaters in Tennessee is how to like indicator nymph really effectively, because that's pretty much all they do down there. Well, that's not true, but like that's a big way that they catch a lot of really good browns in some of those East Tennessee tailwaters. And I'd done it enough that I felt confident that I could like kind of recreate that. And I just wanted to see if it would work. I had no idea. So I pulled up to the first hole, and this is a run that I have never caught a brown trout in, by the way, Andrew. Never caught a brown trout in this run. And I cast in the run, and I'm like trying to find my depth right, because like it's not Euro nymphing. So in Euro nymphing or tight lining, you can kind of just like drop your rod tip or whatever. I couldn't do that in this situation. So I kept having to like make it deeper or shallower. And then finally I found the bottom, because I had seen my indicator just kind of bumping bottom as it went down. And then my indicator goes down, and I like set the hook in kind of like a really pathetic manner, because I just was like, that's not a fish. I set the hook. I see a bar of gold roll. Like I just set the hook. The fish popped off. It was like an 18-inch brown trout. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. And then I casted there for like 10 minutes, didn't catch anything. And then I decided to like let the flies like try to nymph the back end of the hole, or let it run way down and like stack line like we did at that East Tennessee tailwater.
Yeah.
And so I let it, and I stacked line all the way down, and I like literally was almost into my backing, letting this nymph run all the way through this big run. It's a huge run. And I'm looking down there. I can barely see my indicator. And then it's one of those things where I was like, did my indicator disappear? I can't tell. So I like pull up, and I felt fish head shaking, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have one. It took me a while to reel it in just because it was so far out there. It ended up being a rainbow trout, which was a surprise to me because I don't catch many rainbows in that section of river. So I was like, okay, cool. Rainbow trout, like all it really was is proof of concept to me that like I knew I could nymph that stretch of water and catch fish. And the technique I was using does work. So at that point, it was like midday already. So I kind of just walked up to the first hole that I thought I had a good chance of catching a brown trout in. And this is where you're going to get mad at me, Andrew, but I was fishing through this hole, and then I made a cast, and I got tangled up, because it's an indicator rig. How could you not get tangled up? So I got really tangled up, got really mad, stopped recording. You already know where this is going. Stopped recording, okay? And then I get untangled, and I forgot that I had stopped recording. I thought I was still recording. So I'm sitting there talking to the camera, and I'm like, I like start fishing up the run again. And then I cast up, and I literally came up to this pocket. It's like part of a big run, but up towards the head of this run, there's like a bucket in front of a big boulder that I could see. And I literally like looked over, made a cast. And as I made the cast, I was like, man, if there was a big brown trout in here, it would be sitting right in front of this bucket. And I cast it in front of the bucket, and there was kind of like, there's a lot of current there. So my indicator was bouncing up and down in the white water, this current. And then all of a sudden I just completely lost my indicator. I was like, I don't know where the indicator even went. So I set the hook out of reaction, because I was like, I think it went under. And all of a sudden I've got this big brown trout on, like 20+ inch fish all day long, shaking his head. I fought the fish for like probably 5 minutes or something, because I was using like 4X, I think. And it's just when you're nymphing, it's just harder to get the fish in. There's even one point where the fish jumped up, and like it jumped so far out of the water that I like made eye contact with it.
Wow.
Like it was an incredible, whole thing was incredible. I was like getting
That's
hyped
how
up.
it always is when you're not recording, huh? There was just
dude.
The fight was
So
unbelievable.
Well, dude, at this point, I thought I was recording.
We high-fived when he jumped out of the water.
Yes, dude. It was like such a good fight too. The water was clear, so you can see the big fish like shaking his head and kicking down into the hole and everything. And I'm like fighting it. I was like really careful with it too. I was like, I gotta land this fish. I gotta land this fish. Go to land it, and then you know how like after you land a fish, like not one of the first things, but after the fish is good and netted and everything's, you kind of like settle down. You like tap the screen on the GoPro just to make sure you're recording. I tapped the screen, nothing. I was literally like, you've got to be freaking kidding me. And then I hit the record button just to make sure it popped on. I was like, oh my gosh. I just caught this huge brown trout, fought it, was talking to it the whole way down, didn't record for it.
A lot of the times now I will tap the screen as I'm fighting the fish.
Yeah. I mean, I should have.
Because half the time I'm like not looking, or like the line, I'm like I don't have the line tight anymore as I'm trying to like touch the GoPro, so it isn't. Good, but a lot of times I'll end up doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't thrilled with it. I'm not gonna lie, and it's like to me, it's like one of those like weird moral dilemmas where it's like I caught the fish. It was a big brown trout. I should be thrilled. I should be over the moon about how awesome this was. But instead, now I'm upset because I somehow wasn't recording during it. So anyways, I got out the camera and I, got some pictures of it, released the fish. And I looked at the fish. I was like, that fish is probably like 22 inches, maybe 23 inches, I measured it on the net just so I could measure it later and see how big it was. But I was kind of just upset with myself for being such an idiot. I released the fish, swims away perfectly fine, cool. I was like, all right, I got to stay positive because like really this was like only the second hole that I had fished, and I'd already lost a brown in the first hole, and then I caught one in this hole. So I was like, they probably keep going. I just got to keep fishing. So I go up to the next run, which was actually the run that I had the most confidence in because I'd actually seen brown trout in it before. And I come up to this run and I'm actually recording this time. The funniest thing ever is that I was actually recording, got tangled up again, because it's an indicator rig, and then turned off the GoPro. And then after I got, untangled, I turned it back on. And I think at like the beginning of the clip is me saying, okay, guys, I made sure to turn the GoPro back on now, Yeah. And this run sets up funny because there's like two bridge abutments that sit on either side of the river. And there's a big down tree now that I got jammed into the one bridge abutment. And the side that I was fishing on closest to me was actually the deepest, but it didn't have any cover. So I was kind of fishing closer to me. And then one of the casts I like roll casted out, and it was like a surprisingly good roll cast. Like I surprised myself. I was like, wow, I can't believe that went that far out in the river, But it was like closer to that other bridge abutment where the log was. And my indicator is just going down the current, and all of a sudden just kind of slowly goes down, like almost like it's getting like stuck on the bottom.
Yeah.
And dude, I set into it, doesn't move. And then the first movement that fish made literally nearly broke my wrist, ran right for the log. Oh. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've hooked a giant. And I felt like I had zero control over it. And the only thing I could do is I just put like crazy side pressure on it, torqued the rod, and like palmed the reel because it was pulling drag and I was afraid it was going to get underneath the log. And I think it did make it to the log. But the log is pretty stripped of limbs, at least down where it ran. So I think it kind of went underneath it, and then I was able to just kind of pull it back out.
Yeah.
And so I'm fighting this fish. I'm like fighting it. And it actually was less of an impressive fight than the first fish, of course, because I was recording for it. But I think it did jump out of the water once, maybe. I don't remember. No, I don't think this one did. I think this one stayed down pretty low. But this one, after it made that run, I actually swam towards me, and it was on my side of the river. And then it was just like a couple minutes of me trying to make sure I got a good net job because every time it would act like it was done, and then as soon as I put the net in the water, it would shoot off. So I was really scared to net this fish, but I finally got it. It was a beautiful male, perfect condition. And I looked at it and I was like, I measured it on the net too, and I was like, that's probably an inch shorter. So I guessed it was probably like a 21-inch fish, maybe 22, depending on what the first one was. I was like, all right, cool. There's 2 really good browns. Like, I'm pretty happy with that. And I felt like I had like a bunch of other good watered fish. So then I run up to the next hole that I wanted to fish. And this hole's a hole that I really, really wanted to fish because I have seen big browns in it before. So I go up to this hole and I'm fishing the tail out of this hole. Now the tail out, mind you, I've never moved a fish in my life, but it always looks good. There's like a really good bucket behind a pretty big rock or pretty big rock shelf. There's a big bucket and it comes into this beautiful tail out. Never seen a fish there, but it looks good. I start casting it. I cast it like 12, 20 times, whatever it was. I don't know. I casted it for a while. Didn't catch anything. And then I cast in there one time and I'm basically like dragging my nymphs through the back end of the hole. And then my indicator goes down and I think I'm stuck because I'm in shallow water, right?
Yeah.
And you know how like when you try to like strip up your line when you get stuck with like a long, like with like an indicator or any type of fly line, like you have to pull and your line kind of goes up the river because it's going up to where it got stuck at.
Yeah.
Well, I'm doing that. I'm pulling it. I'm like, man, this thing's like, it got stuck way up there, dude. And I'm stripping it up. All of a sudden, the line shoots past me and goes up the river. And I'm like, what is happening right now? And then so then I took off running up the river after it because I'm like, did a fish eat? And I'm just a moron. But I take off running up the river after it, and I look, and I think what I did is I foul hooked a brown trout. Or something weird. Maybe I was dragging the nymph and there was just a brown trout down there and it got foul hooked, or maybe it was swiped at it and missed it. I don't know what happened. I saw my indicator go down. I like partially set the hook thinking I was stuck. I wasn't stuck. It was a fish. Well, the fish shot up past me. I'm like running up the current at this point because I know it's foul hooked just by the way it's fighting. Like there's no head shakes. It's just straight swimming, like powerful swimming. And I got up and I just barely got one glimpse of it. Over 20-inch brown again. But then it just pops off, probably because it was foul hooked somewhere. That happens from time to time.
And I've also seen with nymphs, if they kind of try to eat it, but maybe don't all the way eat it, they'll get hooked in the
pectoral
side.
Yeah.
They'll get hooked there, like because they're like two in the hole, like kind of swimming over.
Yeah.
Pushing to grab it, and they'll like swim over, not quite grab it, but it'll like hit their pec fin, and you'll actually kind of like hook it on that on accident. I had that happen actually twice to me just the other day. I hooked 2 on the pec fin, even though they were obviously like trying to eat it, because I wouldn't have even pulled back if I hadn't have felt something.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that happened to us a lot at Erie as well. Fishing for steelhead, that happens all the time. But anyways, so then I'm riding a high now. I'm thinking like this, I found the secret. This is the greatest thing ever. Like, why haven't I indicator nymphed this before? Like, I'm an idiot, yada, yada, yada. And then I go through this stage where I proceed to not see a fish or not catch a fish other than a little rainbow for about 4 hours.
Oof.
And then finally, it's like 5 o'clock or something. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to run the stretch and try to fish the same area that I hooked and lost that brown in, with Will on the streamer. Just as like, I wanted to attempt a little bit of redemption, but at the same time, like, you don't actually think it's going to happen because I'm assuming that it's been a week. That fish could have moved anywhere, Anyways, I fish up to the hole and I get up to the hole and I get up to the hole and I'm like, all right, this is where it happened, because there's like a little shelf on this hole that comes into like this deep pocket. And it's just kind of it's a nondescript hole where I'm catching the fish. The hole's actually better towards the head end. Never caught anything at the head end. Don't ask me why. All the fish sit back in the back end for some reason. But I was casting this hole and it took like 3 or 4 casts, but then like just randomly one cast, I'm just sitting there and my indicator goes boom, 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 and goes down, bobber down, boys. So I set the hook And as soon as I set the hook, I saw the fish shaking his head. I was like, oh, there's a 20. And I was like, immediately, I was like, this is the fish I lost with Will. You know, I mean, it's impossible to tell for sure because I didn't actually land the fish, but it was just in the exact same run, and it hit like almost the exact same spot where I saw the fish come from when it ate my streamer. And like, what are the odds of like a bunch of fish sitting there that size? So anyways, I fought this fish, and this fish was actually the best fight. It jumped out of the water several times as well. But it was a really annoying fight because at the very end, I was like, it was a double nymph rig, but I had like a tag nymph, like I was Euro nymphing. Like that's how I tied the rig up. And like probably at the very end of the fight, like before I was probably going to land the fish, the tag nymph got snagged on the tail, or like maybe the anal fin or something.
Because then you're like dragging it sideways.
Yes.
Water,
so
and
then
you can't do anything with it.
Yes, dude. So then this fish now, I'm like trying to pull a sail in the wind across the current, dude. Because all of a sudden I lost leverage to turn his head, you know.
Yeah.
So then I'm like trying to like pull this sail across, and it's like a good brown trout, you know. And I'm like fighting for my life. It probably doubled the length of the fight. Like no lie. I was sitting there, I was like, I wish I could just break off that tag nymph right now because I would land the fish in a heartbeat. But I couldn't turn it, you know. And finally I did. I netted it, and I was like, let's go. Like that's redemption. That's a cool story, you know, like to even be able to catch a fish like that, let alone 3 in the same day was, you know, I was like, thank goodness. And this fish, I was like, no, it was on. No. It was on. No. I made sure I recorded after that first mistake. And this will be a video at some point. I haven't even started editing it because I got a bunch of musky videos, and I had Andrew's video and stuff like that. But then, so I take pictures with the fish, beautiful male. I'm thinking like 20, 21 inches top, you know, still thinking the same thing I did when I lost the fish with Will. And just out of curiosity, I sit down and I bump the fish because I have my musky bump board with me that I occasionally bring with me when I'm fishing for big browns. And I bumped that fish at 22.5 inches. And I was like, what? And I looked at the fish again. I was like, man, I just doesn't, for some reason, I was like underestimating the size of the fish. I was like, that didn't look at 22.5 inches to me. But I was like, whatever. It's literally bumped. How could it be wrong? So I was like, oh my gosh, that's a lot bigger. And then I was like, well, how big were those first 2 fish I caught? Yeah. So then I went back and I bumped my net because I had my net sitting right next to me, and I bumped my net. And that first brown I caught that I wasn't recording for was 24.5 inches.
24.5?
Yes, dude. And then the second one, the male that I caught, was right around 23.5 inches.
Oh my gosh.
So I caught a 22.5, a 23.5, and a 24.5. And here I was just sitting there thinking like, oh, like I've caught a couple low 20, you know, I thought I caught like a 20, maybe that bit long female was maybe 23 inches on a good day. No, 24.5. And honestly, Andrew, I'm slightly underdoing this. Like that female could have been as big as she could have been pushing 25. Like she was like it was a way bigger fish than I thought, like by multiple inches.
I would hate to see you actually catch something you think is a good size. It'd be a 30.
I know, dude.
24. It's like 32.
Dude, I don't know why I underestimated fish so woefully on that trip. Like to me, like the fish just didn't look like when they were sitting in my net, I was like, you know, like as I said, that really big one, I was like, she could maybe be 23 inches or something. You know, I don't know why I just underestimated it so poorly. And like, obviously the 2 fish that I put on my net and then like bumped, I mean, that's not perfectly accurate, but like that female was not under 24 inches. She was over 24 all day long. And that male was not under 23 inches. You know what I mean? Like both of those fish were just donkey fish. Did I even send you the pictures of those fish, Andrew?
No, I never got any picture other than the one 22.5 that you had on the bumper.
Yeah. So I'll just send you these pictures real quick. So the first one I'm sending you is a 22.5 that was bumped, actually bumped. That just delivered.
That's the 22.5?
That's the 22.5.
Yeah,
The second
I
one
can
that just delivered, that's a
see
23
that
and a
being
half.
22 and a half for sure.
Yeah. Second one,
And
that
I
one's
could see that
23 and a
being
half.
20. I could, like, if I just saw that picture, I would say that it could be a 24 incher.
It could have been. As I said, I'm aiming low on these because they were netted and they weren't bumped. And then this last picture, that's the 24 and a half. It should be delivering soon.
Yeah, I mean, those are all just really long fish, and they're all like perfect too. They're all pretty and absolutely
Yep.
perfect specimens of trout.
Yep.
No,
100%. They do. None of those
no,
fish even had a single.
other than them being a hair bit skinny, but I think that's just because of the time of the year that you caught
Yeah.
it. Sorry, I was facing away from the mic. I might not have even been talking
No, you're good.
clearly, but yeah.
Yeah, all of those fish are perfect. Not one of them had a scar on them. Nothing on the entire fish. Like they're like fish that they look like they've never been touched, which maybe they haven't. I don't know, but
Take me there
yeah.
whenever I'm there. That's where I want to be fishing this stretch. I want to catch a 20, 25, a 24, and a 23.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that I had something figured out, but I went last week and tried to do it again. And I moved a really big fish on a streamer in this one stretch of water. And then I tried nymphing the rest of the day and didn't catch a single fish. So I don't even know anything about anything, is what I'm trying to say. But I did have like a crazy good day of fishing. And yeah, I mean, that'll probably be my best day of brown trout fishing. Could be the best day of brown trout fishing of the year, to be honest with you. I mean, how often are you going to catch 3 fish of that caliber, you know?
Well,
So,
I would say the problem of nymphing, like in that type of area, is that there probably isn't like 10 of those brown trout in that hole. There's probably a brown trout or two. So to nymph it, you really have to get it probably pretty close to the brown trout compared to like streamer fishing. If they're active, like they'll chase it across the river, which is
correct.
how you'll see them streamer fishing. And if you nymph through the stretch, you might not catch any at all because if you don't cast close to it, then you might not ever even have it eat.
Correct. And also,
So
like, these fish, it's not like a super high population density. So I think part of the reason like you can be successful in some of these like lower population density trout waters is because they kind of do suck, which sounds silly to say considering I just caught 3 big browns out of one of them. But like if you fish it and it's not a good day, you can very easily go a whole day and not catch a fish like I did last week. I went back to the same general area, went all day long, did not catch a single fish. So like a lot of people don't fish it and they're not willing to put the time in. And then if the people that do fish it, a lot of them are just streamer fishing, which, can be really effective on a good day. But sometimes the fish just aren't willing to chase streamers. And if that's the case, and in my instance, I knew the water well enough that I could kind of purposely nymph certain areas for fish that I knew had to exist or did exist in the past, which I think helped me be super successful on that particular day. I also think I had one fly that was working, and when I lost that fly, I stopped catching fish. So that could also be part of it.
yeah.
But I'm not going to say what fly it was because that way, if people are listening to this podcast and know where I was fishing, I don't want them to know what I was using. So,
Well, the same thing
anyways,
happened to me on my trip too. I had a fly that was doing good, and then I broke that off, and I didn't catch any more fish on the nymph the rest of the
yeah.
day.
So I think you should just briefly go over what we're going to talk about today, guys. We're going to talk about bull trout here in a minute, but I want Andrew to briefly go over. We just posted a video. By the time this podcast comes out, the video will probably be like a week old. But we just posted a video where Andrew made his return after breaking every rod he owned on some big fish. And was that January that you did that? Or
Yeah,
February?
it
I don't
was
remember.
January.
But
I
anyways, he
believe.
broke every rod he owned like a true champion, and he finally got them all repaired because most of them are Thomas and Thomas, right? Is that what they all were?
Yeah, well, I got two of them fixed. The other one is still sitting here broken because I really don't know what to do with it. It's the Cortland rod. I don't know what to do with that one.
Is there a warranty on the Cortland rods?
I'm sure there is, but I haven't looked at it. So
Well,
yeah,
maybe we'll try to get that figured out. But anyways,
but I'll
he had a
just
really good day on the water, so he might as well talk about that just briefly.
yeah, I'll make it pretty brief. But this is my first time ever going to this body of water. So I just wanted to go try it out and see how it was because I've heard obviously that there was some big fish in there, and I was like, okay, well, there's big trout. I want to catch a big trout, so let's go and check it out. So I went there, um, fished it, and I caught one. It was a 24-inch rainbow trout. So I mean, I'd say that's big, but I mean, I guess some
I
people
would say it's
have
big
different
as well.
standards. Some people have different standards, but I mean, I'd say that was a very big trout, and I was thrilled with it. But um, I started off with just a small with my jig streamer, and if you've seen any of like the Colorado videos that we have posted, I use this fly a lot, and that's because honestly, it's probably the most effective fly I've ever used out here, at least in Colorado. I'd say 75% of my big trout I've caught on this fly, but that's beside the point. But
I
so I
would like
fished
to
it.
I
What?
would like to say that I have also caught big brown trout on that fly because last year in Colorado I caught that 25.5-inch brown on that fly, and then I turned around and came back, and in the state of West Virginia, I caught a 25-inch brown trout on that fly. So it's a little fly, but it packs a pretty big punch. So, anyways, you may continue.
And I guess I don't have a ton to say about it, but there was this one spot in particular that I found on the river, and there was a pod, which I hadn't really seen anything like this out here up at this point, or at least not this extreme. But it was a pod of probably about 20 a rainbow trout, and they were stacked so close together. Like it was in like an area of like 5 feet by 5 feet, and it was like 20 rainbow trout, and all of them were like so close together. They were like swimming on top of each other, and I saw this, and it was I thought it was cool, and I was like, well, I should be able to catch at least a trout or two out of this giant pot of trout, because I mean you have to think like out of all of them there has to be a few that are eating. But I saw this one bigger rainbow trout, and in particular that I saw, and it was out towards the head of the pod, which was fortunate because I couldn't have really casted at it very well if it hadn't have been at the front of the pack, and because I kind of drifted through the whole pod and actually tried to catch it. So um, I tied on some nymphs, and sadly I broke off. I'm pretty sure it was 4 times, and I kept like drifting it in front of this trout. It didn't eat, and I would kind of keep drifting it, and like the other trout would be like swarming, like jumping out of the water almost to grab it, but I didn't want them to grab it, so I'd kind of pull it out. But every so often, a trout would actually grab it, and I'd kind of pull up slowly, and I didn't actually hook the fish, so it like slingshotted my line, and I kept getting stuck in this dumb pine tree that was right behind me. And that happened about
Yeah, if
four
you guys
times.
Yeah, if you guys haven't watched the video, you should watch it just for that point. I was literally dying laughing editing that. I didn't put all the breaks in there because at towards the end, like after the third break, Andrew just starts mumbling to himself. He's just like, I don't know why you're afraid tomorrow. And I was just like, okay, maybe that's not great content. But like the funniest one is like the second time he gets stuck in the tree, he gets stuck and he's like, oh my freaking word. It's just the funniest thing ever. I could not stop laughing.
Well, and it's one of those things that you like know it's there and you know it's happening, but you somehow still it still keeps happening, even though you know it's happening and you don't want it to happen. And it's like, okay, this pine tree's behind me. I have to pay attention.
Yeah.
And somehow still I am getting stuck in this pine tree. That's behind me. But eventually, well, I caught the fish, but just before I caught it, I actually broke off my like tag and nymph, and I like broke it off, and I was like, I'm not retying this whole thing again. I'm tired of it. I'm just gonna cast this singular nymph on the end of this, and just keep casting it. And if it doesn't eat, I'm gonna leave. So I
Yeah.
cast it, and it only took like a few casts after the tag nymph broke off. So maybe it just really hated that tag. Um, and honestly, I didn't even think I had it. I was just kind of like pulling up to like keep the nymph away from all the other trout, and it was just kind of on. And I was like, oh, there's the fish. So I caught it, and it was like a 20-inch
Yeah.
rainbow trout, and I caught it, and then I proceed to. I'm not kidding. I think I almost caught every trout in that pod after that, and I don't know why they all like started to feed after that, or if it was just that nymph I had on, or if they just the time of the day they just started to feed. But I probably caught I don't know, like 15 trout like out of that pod, and it was just like I would cast in, pull out a trout out of this pod, I would just rip it out, like the fish would scatter. I would unhook it and I'd cast in, and like three trout would just start chasing it again. And I'm like, are these trout like kind of get a bit smarter? And they just didn't.
Yeah.
So after I caught like 15 of them, I got stuck in that same pine tree again, and I broke off. And I'm like, okay, I don't really care, because I thought I had like a bunch of those nymphs I was throwing. So I broke up on the tree, checked my box, and that was the only one of those nymphs I had. So I tried, so I tied on again, tied a different color on, and it just didn't really do anything for me. So I moved down the river, talked to a few people who were also fishing, and I don't think anybody was doing quite as good as I did. I think I just kind of found a few pockets that were really doing good. And then at the very end of the day, um, I mean, normally it's always best to try and like save the big catch in the video for the end, but like I actually caught the big trout at the very end of the video. Like I was like about to leave and not even like casting this hole, but I was like, oh well, I'll like check it out, because I'm like, I'm already here. I would hate to not cast in it, and I did. I ended up catching that big rainbow trout, and that was also on my jig streamer. But it was overall, I would say it was very good, and I definitely plan on heading back. I've got some more intel on the place I was actually fishing, and I know of another time or two that I could see some even bigger trout in there. So I'll have to keep that on the radar. I'm sure many people know the place I was fishing if you've been around the area, but it was good.
if you've been
I
if
enjoyed
you've
it.
been in the state of Colorado, you might know where he's at.
Yeah. So, but
um,
it was good. Fun place to fish, and it kind of reminds me of which I can't say the name of it, but a creek out there actually that you fished many times. It kind of reminds me of that, just kind of bigger by about three times as big. If you
yeah,
kind of know the place I'm talking about, maybe not.
not really, but sure. Reminds me of that one
it's
creek
the
that's like three
it's
times the
the
size. I'm like, dude, you just named half the streams that I fish. I don't know what you're talking
it's the
about.
it's where you've caught some of your bigger rainbow trout.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
There's tons of trout in every hole.
Yeah.
They're tough to catch though. It's like there's
Yeah.
plenty of
Yeah.
20
Yeah.
inchers in there, but they're not easy to catch.
Yeah.
But it was a
Yeah.
fun creek, and hopefully I'll get to head back there at some point.
Yeah. No, I mean, I kind of want to fish it now. I'd like to go back there in the fall personally.
Oh, I want to go back there in the fall. I've also heard there's a guy was talking to me on there. He said there's some guide or somebody down there who if he catches a brown trout, he'll like take it out and transplant it somewhere else because he only wants there to be rainbow trout. And I'm like, what? I don't think you can do that. Or not even that,
Why?
but it's just like it isn't possible to remove every brown trout out of a body of water.
Yeah. First of all, that's a completely useless endeavor.
I know. He's like, I
Second of
only want there to
all,
be rainbow trout here. I'm like, yeah,
second
okay.
of all, why? Like, I've never heard anybody not want brown trout and want rainbow trout instead, unless the rainbow trout are native, which they aren't. So that doesn't even make sense. But
Oh,
anyways,
also, I don't know if these are even there, but I actually I hooked and lost a brook trout too that I didn't have on film, but it was a
huh?
brook trout, and I was like, oh, there's a brook trout, and I like started to like net it, and it popped off, but it was like very obviously a brook trout, and I was like,
Well,
oh,
there's probably brook trout in all those tributaries. You'd think. I mean, brook
yeah,
trout are a
it
dime a
probably
dozen out
is,
there.
and it just kind of float down eventually until they find
Yeah.
bigger water. So,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Makes
I thought
sense.
that was interesting because I'm like, oh, brown trout, brook trout, are we getting a tiger trout? Somewhere in here,
Well,
it could
also,
be.
then that makes you think, like, in the fall, brook trout also spawn in the fall. What if there's like big brookies that pushed up and tried
What
to
if
spawn
there's
from somewhere?
like a 20-inch brook trout in there that's calling my name?
And that would be pretty cool. But we'll worry about that come September.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about bull trout, Andrew. Let's do it. Because I had a bull trout trip, and I just wanted to talk about it just at least a little bit. One of the things I wanted to say about the bull trout trip, aside from it being incredible in every way, shape, form, and fashion, is that one thing that I didn't mention in the videos, which they've been out for a while now, is that this trip was kind of on a budget. I think everybody, when they think about bull trout, at least us like guys from the East Coast, like bull trout is like almost on everybody's bucket list, you know? And we always think of them as like something that's like really difficult to do or like far out of reach, you know, because they're so far away and it's probably an expensive trip, this, that, and the other thing. It did not cost me much to do this. Like my buddy Will hits me up and he's just like, hey man, like I have a really cool trip I'm doing. Do you want in on it? And I was like, well, what's the trip? And he was like, oh, I'm going to go to Oregon, and try to catch some bull trout. And I was like, all right, cool. Like I'm down. I hadn't really even thought of Oregon as having bull trout, but I mean, I know that like Washington, Oregon, Idaho, like all that area has bull trout, but it just wasn't like on my list of places necessarily to go. Well, let me rephrase that. Oregon was on my list of places to go, but not necessarily for bull trout. But the opportunity was presented, and I was like, yeah, sure. Because he had already been there and already fished it before, the particular area where these bull trout are. And it's just a really cool and unique fishery. But anyways, one of the things I was looking at when he invited me, I was like, well, let me see how much it's going to cost me. And I like just Googled flights from, I was flying out of Pittsburgh to, out in Oregon. And the first flight I Googled, and it was like something stupidly low, like $300 round trip. $300 to fly across the country, like landing in Denver. So there was a layover in Denver, but landing in Denver, staying in Denver for like an hour or two, and then going to Oregon. $300. Like, I don't know how they're making money. Like, surely on fuel alone, you'd spend more than that. But anyways, it was like $300. I like chose my seat because I just wanted a window seat. Like, I just wanted to be able to stare out the window when people annoy me. So it ended up costing me, like, maybe the seats all said and done after taxes and I had to check a bag and stuff, was maybe like $400 round trip, which is insanely cheap, by the way. And then me and Will got we got an Airbnb while we were out there, which was a pretty cheap Airbnb. And I think maybe for the 5 days I was out there, I paid $300 or something. Like, we split it. So $300 plus the $400, $700. Let's say, I don't remember how much the license was, but let's say the license was $100 or something. And then
Plus some
food.
food. Basically, like
I
under $1,000, you can
Yes,
be out there for what, 3 4 days? 4 days?
I think
4 days
it
of fish? No, 3 days of fishing.
3 full days of fishing. But I think I was out there for counting travel days. It was 5 days. I was gone.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, for essentially 5 days, let's say 3 days of hard fishing, I spent less than $1,000, which,
I guess that's still
I feel like
expensive.
I disagree. I think that's cheap. I mean, for a destination fly trip to spend less than $1,000.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, dude, we spent triple that in Tennessee, and we didn't even go across. Well, you went across the country. I didn't even go. I didn't do anything, and I
It's
spent
pretty
triple
far.
that. I mean, you get like, dude, you added it. If I had gotten a guide for one day, it would have equaled the entire cost of the trip for me. Like
I
that.
agree
Like
with that.
to me, for a destination trip, that is really cheap. If you can keep it under
Yeah.
$1,000, that's pretty crazy. So, anyways, the trip was really cheap, relatively, and we went out there. And first of all, Oregon's incredible. Andrew, you've been to Washington a couple of times, so like what the Pacific Northwest looks like. That was my first time being out there. It's jaw dropping. It's so stunning. I mean, you hear about like all these cliches about the Pacific Midwest or Pacific Northwest, and they're all true. Like every time you're like, it feels like you're in Narnia the whole time. You're just like, whoa, like all the
Yeah.
forests are like they're like mystery. Like it's just cool. It's just really cool. It feels like you're gonna see Bigfoot. That's all I'm saying. It feels like you're gonna see Bigfoot. But
Yeah, I was like, that's where it came from. And
yes,
you can like see that too. It's like, okay, I could see why people would think that out here.
yeah. Like when we're out east and someone says Bigfoot, I'm like, oh come on, dude. When the leaves are off the tree, I can see across the mountain. Like, you know what I mean? Like black bear, you know what I mean? Anyways, I don't want to get into that, but yeah, when you go out there, you're just like, it's so thick and it's like a rainforest. And the section I was in wasn't even technically the rainforest because I was on the east side of the whatever that big mountain range is. That's like right off the coast, obviously, but so it wasn't even a rainforest, but it was just still so magical and it was pretty cool. And there was like a couple cool moments. Like one point, me and Will are sitting there fishing one morning, and we just hear this like giant crashing noise. And at first it sounded like, like when a big, huge tree falls in the woods, and like limbs are snapping and stuff. It was like that, but it didn't stop. Like it kept going and going and going and going. Like so long that me and Will stopped fishing, started staring at each other like, dude, what is happening on that hill? Because it was like right across the hill from us. And the only thing we could think of, we put two and two together because when we were hiking out, we looked over on that opposing hill there, and it had been burned in a fire, like the hillside had. And we think it was a landslide, like rocks or something were crumbling down, and it was like literally snapping trees off, like twigs and stuff going down the hill. But it just like, it went on for so long, and me and Will were like, oh my gosh, like what is happening over there? Like is there like a Bigfoot? Like
Yeah, the Bigfoot's on a
taking
tear over on that
Yeah,
mountain.
dude. Bigfoot's going crazy over there, man. But no, yeah. So there was like a couple like really cool wild moments. Another really cool moment is right after I caught my first bull trout, which I'll talk about in a second. We climbed up on back on the trail that goes along the side of this river, and there were fresh mountain lion tracks in the snow along the trail there, like from the night before. So I was like, mountain lions are walking down the same trails people are out there, which is, I find it fascinating because we don't get like mountain lions and stuff out east. So it's just really cool. But one thing I learned about bull trout, at least in this situation, and I know this isn't necessarily true like across the board, but that wood is good, like, which I found funny because out east, like that wood is good is something that like some of my buddies used to describe like what good brook trout habitat is, which is also a char, and bull trout is a char. So it's funny that like I'm fishing out and as far away from, not quite as far away from West Virginia as I can get, but almost as far away from West Virginia as I can get in the United States. And fishing for another char, albeit it's a slightly bigger char, but it's just another char. And I'm catching them in logs exactly the same way that, like you catch a nice brook trout out east under a log. But there's a couple things I wanted to say about this bull trout trip, and then I'll see if Andrew has any questions for me. But one is that I learned that there are like bull trout that were local bull trout, and then there were migratory bull trout. So, which, it's kind of like, well, no duh. But like, I didn't think about that until I got out there. And there would be like local bull trout, which is the bull trout that I was catching. And like a local bull trout might be somewhere between like 18 to maybe 24, 25 inches would be a big one, like a huge one. And they like lived in that particular section of river year round. Like they never left. They lived in the log jams. Those were the fish that were really, they related to cover heavily. And then there were the migratory bull trout. And the migratory bull trout were the ones that would like leave the river entirely, after they spawned. And they only come up in the fall and they chase kokanee and stuff like that up the river. And the migratory bull trout are the ones that they catch like 40 inches, that weigh like however much a 40-inch bull trout weighs. So I didn't know that until we got out there. And then like the more me and Will fish, the more we realized that like the migratory fish just really weren't in there that much. There were some in there because I had like a giant 30-inch bull trout chasing a red band trout that I caught, which was my first red band trout ever, and I was super excited. And I'm pulling the red band in, and all of a sudden the red band's like chasing, like a bull trout's chasing my red band around my feet as I'm trying to net the red band, which was really cool. So yeah, there were some migratory bull trout in there, but there weren't many because we were there in the winter and they'd kind of all left. I'm not gonna say they all left, but most of them had left. So the numbers of really big fish in that river wasn't really there when we were there, but I still managed to catch a couple good fish.
I'll say, in terms of like migratory fish in general, which I guess we could get more into in the future, but there's like pros and cons to kind of both of them, like the local and the migratory. Obviously, the local fish are normally a bit smaller, but they're more predictable in where they're going to be, but then they're also harder to catch because they live there all the time. And it's like the exact opposite. The migratory are normally, they're kind of all over the place, and they're like tougher to predict and like hone in on, but they're normally a bit easier to catch because they're kind of there to feed or to push up to spawn or to push down. So it's like kind of pros and cons to both of them in terms of if you're trying to actually just catch fish. So yeah, but we could talk about that more.
I mean, you're right. Well, essentially what happened is because we had success with the quote unquote local bull trout, I ended up targeting them because I didn't know any better. So in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm just going to I'm catching all these fish off of wood. So I just started really honing in on the wood. And then essentially what happened is we had one really bad day of fishing where we didn't catch a single fish. I think we only moved like 2 bull trout all day long. And me and Will were talking that night and we were like, man, we got to figure something out. So we were like, let's go to a local fly shop, because he told me that last time he was in Oregon over there, he went to a fly shop and he walked up to the guy at the counter. He was like, I want to catch a bull trout. And the guy essentially said, if you really want to catch a bull trout right now, you're going to have to go to like this section of water. And he went there and he caught a 28-inch bull trout. And I was like, well, if it's that easy, why don't we just go to the same fly shop and be like, dude, where are the bull trout? And sometimes there's like a game you have to play at fly shops where you kind of have to like prove that you know enough to like not be a complete fool. So we talked to this guy at the fly shop for a little bit, and then eventually he was kind of just like, yeah, I mean, like if you really want to catch a bull trout right now, he's like, this one section of river, he was like, I would not leave that section of river. He said there's going to be like a handful of like really good pockets where there's going to be bull trout, and you just got to find those pockets. He was like, I'm not going to tell you where the pockets are. And, fair enough. We didn't want to know the exact pockets anyways. We liked finding fish too. But at that point, we had fished almost all of the fishable section of that river. So when he told us, he was like, yeah, this certain section of water between this hole and this couple mile stretch of water is where you should focus. And me and Will were like, all all right, say no more. So we literally we parked at the one parking lot for that section of river, and we hiked down to the bottom of it, and we fished up it. And we parked down, and then we literally would just go up, and we just kept switching sides of the river, like going back. That's all we did the whole day. We didn't leave that stretch of water. And we found one pocket that we found. I'm sure there were more, but this is what we had time to find. We found one pocket that had bull trout in it, and a couple big bull trout. And I caught one little one, and then I had that really huge bull trout chase my red band in. And then there were a couple other like really good bull trout in that pocket too. Will actually lost one that wasn't on video. He lost probably a 2-footer on a nymph in that certain pocket that we were fishing. So it was like, I wish I knew the name of that fly shop because I would give him a shout out on here. But yeah, that guy pretty much saved our butt for our last day of fishing, because if it weren't for him, we probably wouldn't have focused on that section of river. And then what we found, or what we realized in retrospect, is that all the fish we had caught, all the bull trout we caught, was from that section of river. And that even the local fish seemed to like that section of river a lot more for whatever reason, which was weird. It was like of all the log jams we fished on the entire river, we wouldn't see anything. And then like there's certain section of river in the winter during that time of the year just had the bull trout. I don't know why that is, but according to the guy at the fly shop, it's just like, it's just like the winter holding water. Like this is where they hold in the winter. And then like in a couple months it changes, and then they hold in different sections. And then like during certain times of the year, the lower section of the river is good. Certain sections of the year, at certain times of the year, it's upper section. You know what I mean? Like it just changes for the time of the year. But yeah, that was a huge help. And then there's another thing that we didn't realize at the time. And if we had, we would have changed how we were fishing totally. But we learned that there were actually, and we learned this long after we had left, but there were actually steelhead in the river at the time. And we didn't know, but if you watch the first video of that trip, of my Oregon trip, at one point I walk up and I look down and I say I see a bull trout, and then Will walks up and he looks at me and he's like, that looks like a rainbow trout to me. Like it looks like a red band. And then I make some comment like, do red band get that big? Like there's no way that a red band, because this was like a 22 to I said 22 inches. It was probably bigger than that. It was like a huge like what we thought was a red band. And I told Will, I was like, dude, if the red band get this big, then sign me up. Like, what are we doing with the bull trout? Because that was cool, just as cool to me, because I never even caught a red band at the time. And then we learned that they were actually having returns of steelhead in the river at the time. And probably what I was looking at was a steelhead. And if we had known that, we would have sat there and nymphed that fish up, because both of us agreed that we could have caught that fish because it was moving at our streamers. If we had just nymphed it, like indicator nymphed it, surely we could have caught that fish, but we didn't know what it was.
Out there, the steelhead are even more special because it's like the native, straight from the ocean.
So on that particular river, those were the native run of steelhead on that river had long since disappeared because of dams and stuff. But they had, I think it was just last year, or maybe the year prior, had started putting like fingerling steelhead in there.
Okay.
So, but they were having returns of steelhead. So the steelhead had run all the way out to wherever the heck in the Pacific Ocean, and then come all the way back up to this river. And then we were staring at them and didn't know. And if we had known, we would have spent way more time on that, because that would have been just as cool as a bull trout, to be honest with you. And the funniest thing,
probably people who go there just to try and find a steelhead. You're just like, oh, there's one. Let me just keep going.
Yeah, maybe now. I don't think anybody. I mean, some of the locals know, obviously. Like if you live there or live in the area, you probably knew there was steelhead coming in, but like we didn't know, and I don't think a lot of the people knew. We ran into two guys. They were a little bit younger than us, but they just nonchalantly were like, yeah, we caught like a 30-inch steelhead. And me and Will were like, say what, huh? And this is while we were there, and we were like, 30-inch steelhead. And we were just like, nah, they I don't think they know what they're talking about. Like, there's not steelhead in here, is there? And we were like, no, surely not. We learned there was, and they were actually correct. But the funniest thing ever is those guys were like, yeah, it was just a hatchery steelhead, not that big of a deal. And I'm like, You're telling me a 30-inch steelhead that ran to the Pacific Ocean and back just because it has a clipped fin is not that big of a deal? Like, that's sick, dude. And also, like, they have to start somewhere. Now the steelhead are up there. What if they successfully spawn and then go back to, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
it
like
just,
it might. Yeah,
it's just so funny. Like those like super West Coast, like the West Coast is just, they get so snooty about their fish, which is something that like out east, we are not snooty at all. We're like, wild, sounds good to me. Stock, don't care. If it's big, it's cool. You know what I mean? And out west, they're
yeah,
like, nope, this one's got a clipped fin, or this one's native, or this one came from this river, or this one didn't make it because of this. You know what I mean? Like they're very well educated, but because of that, they get really picky about their fish. But anyways, yeah, that was pretty cool, pretty interesting. And if we had known that, we probably would have fished differently, but we probably wouldn't have caught as many bull trout. So take that as you will. But anyways, you got any questions for me?
let us see. I think I had a couple questions. So for the bull trout, which I don't know if you got to experience a ton because you were just throwing streamers, but how did like they fight compared to like a brown trout and or a rainbow trout?
I would say bull trout fight more like a brown trout than a rainbow trout. I only
Okay.
caught one on a nymph, and he fought pretty hard. It wasn't a very big one. The brown trout I caught, or sorry, the bull trout that I caught on the streamers did a lot of the same brown trout moves, where they kind of just like shook their heads and they would dig down. They didn't really run. But in all fairness, I was catching bull trout that were probably, I mean, the biggest one was 21.5 inches, and I was
Yeah.
catching them out of log jams where they didn't really have anywhere to go.
Yeah.
And I was geared up for them. So a 21-inch fish for what the gear I had wasn't a super big deal. I've heard that especially in that particular river, the current is way strong. So I've heard that if you don't have the right gear in that river and you hook a really big one, you can get in trouble in a hurry. But it also has really strong current. So I don't know. I'll be interested to see like in August when we go to Idaho, how that compares to what I experienced in Oregon. But yeah, I'd say that they didn't not fight. They fought harder than like a walleye would, but
Yeah.
but they're not like, it wasn't like a rainbow trout where you hook it and it tries to run away from you and like go on big runs and stuff. They kind of just darted for cover and stuff.
Okay. Yeah. I was just curious how they compared because I know some fish you see are like have some different characteristics. The other question I was gonna ask was about the scenery there, but you already kind of talked about that and how
Yeah.
that's cool. But I can only imagine like going to that type of place. It's like picturesque, perfect, and then you like hook a 30+ inch bull trout too. I mean, it's just like
Yep.
that's what you're
Oh,
dreaming
dude,
for right there.
me and Will is hilarious. So he's been like sending me all this stuff, and he might listen to this podcast, but like he keeps sending me these pictures of like these like super cool like fish destinations. Like Oregon was one of them, but we basically learned that if we wanted to fish for bull trout again in this area, we would go in October because supposedly the kokanee, the bull trout spawn in September. So you either want to go in August or you want to go in October. So in August, the bull trout run up the river so you can catch bigger fish. They supposedly spawn in September, and then they kind of push out of the tribs that they spawn in September. And then in October at some point, the kokanee run up and the kokanee spawn in the tributaries. And supposedly the bull trout eat the kokanee. Now, you've seen kokanee run. Okay, you know how
I
big
mean,
kokanee are.
I don't think a bull trout could eat a kokanee. I mean,
I'm
talking about
telling
20-inch
you,
fish.
I'm
20,
telling you
18
that
plus incher.
that is what they say. They say the bull
Is she
trout
just
run up and eat the kokanee.
is she just float in the water and like there's like a 40-inch bull trout at that 18-inch kokanee in between its jaws.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. You're like,
But me and Will were like, dude, if we even have a chance at like going up, and first of all, the kokanee, like, you know how the West is, but like every single tributary shut down everywhere for something spawning at some point. Who the heck even knows?
yeah,
So you couldn't actually do anything, but you could theoretically go up and like see, the kokanee spawning and fish the mouths where the tributaries run into the main river and swing 12-inch streamers that might vaguely look like a kokanee and hope to catch a 40-inch or 30-plus-inch bull trout, which would be crazy.
I would love to even just go up the tributaries just to look at what's happening.
Yeah, I
Not
know.
even gonna be fishing, like see like a 36-inch a bull trout swimming around with like kokanee, or just even just like giant bull trout, or just seeing the kokanee too is like really cool
Yeah,
in
well,
those small
so
trips.
we did a little bit of hitchhiking in Oregon at one point because we walked too far and had to walk too far back to the car. So we did the old hitchhike back to our car trick, which worked. And this older gentleman picked us up, and he knew quite a bit about the area. He was kind of a local. We were talking to him for a little bit, and he was like, "Yeah, there's a certain tributary that a lot of the bull trout spawn in. Like it's one of the little tribs that bull trout spawn in." And we looked at the tributary, and it's like Brook Trout Creek size, like Eastern Brook Trout Creek,
Oh, that'd
tiny,
be
teeny,
so
tiny.
cool.
And he said that like he went out with Trout Unlimited one time to like they do like shocking surveys on the creeks every now and again to just check up on the bull trout and see how they're doing. And in these creeks, they have like young of the year bull trout in them, like 6 to 8 inches is about how big they are. But he said the 6 to 8 inch bull trout, when they'd shock one, they'd have to put it in, they put in like little buckets of water or whatever. They had to, each bull trout had to have their own bucket because if they put two in the same bucket, they would eat each other. That's how aggressive they are. Dude, I don't know, dude. I just imagine like an 8-inch bull trout with a 6-inch bull trout T-boned in its mouth. And then you wonder how they eat kokanee salmon that run up the river. But anyways, it's just a really cool spot.
See a 24-inch bull trout swimming in a brook trout sized creek.
I know. Yeah. I don't even know how to get up there, but
and like, well, it isn't a problem, but that is the thing too, how you can't fish but like out there, like every trib of everything closed down. It's just like kind of annoying in terms of like it's like your own like personal like, oh man, I would love to just be able to fish this trip with 30-inch bull trout in it. But then it's like, okay, well, I mean, I see like what they're trying to do, but still, it's just like everything just completely shuts down out there, like fall and like spring. It's just like everything's just shut down, and it's just like, well, I guess I can't fish at all for like 6 months of the year.
No, it's all fully shut down. At least I will give credit to at least this section or this area in Oregon. At least they had like signs on the trees that said like, attention anglers, you cannot fish this, which is a lot better than having to get like your degree to figure out what you can and can't fish. They very clearly state
a lot of
you can't
places touch. Which I'll speak on more on this because I'm sure we'll have a whole podcast and I'll talk about my time in Washington and stuff. But it was a thing where everything was closed unless otherwise noted. And I was like,
I know.
What?
Is that crazy?
Everything
is that not crazy?
Well, I think they do that just to like cover like every tiny trib that you don't even know the name of. It's just like So, but it's like still just like everything's closed unless otherwise noted. I'm just like, goodness gracious, you can't fish anything, then can you?
No, dude, it's freaking crazy. Which is like the East. Like, there's no such thing as blue lining out west, because
no, there isn't.
If you blue line,
you can't do
you're gonna get
you're
a ticket.
fishing in illegal water.
Yes, you're illegally fishing if you're blue lining out west, which is mind blowing to us.
Kind of take some of the fun out of it. Like, oh, I'm fishing up the river, and like, oh, here's a cool trip. I'll try it out. But you can't do that out there because you have to like search it up and be like, oh, what's this trip called? And you have to see if you can fish it. And most of the time you cannot fish it. But
yeah, you out west, you have to have a plan before you ever leave the house, because you can't just like be driving down the road and be like, oh, I'm gonna fish this river. No, if you do, you're gonna get arrested. Or, oh, I'm gonna fish this creek. Incorrect. Fine. Like, you've got to really know what you're doing before you ever leave the house, which is like that's just like a big cultural difference between the far west and like being out on the west coast versus the east coast.
I'm lucky enough that in like Colorado, it isn't that far extreme that happens. Which is just partly because it doesn't have like all those like native species out there. Like here, all we have is the cutthroat, um, but we don't
Yeah.
have like salmon and bull trout and
Well, yeah, and like they don't really do much. There's not really much regulation on like they don't shut down waters for cutthroat
no,
to
it's
spawn,
all
really.
open. You
Yeah.
can fish in a spawning creek for cutthroat all you want.
Yeah.
So
But all right, I guess we'll wrap up this podcast by answering a few questions. So I picked a few questions before we started this podcast. I just literally went through the comments on the YouTube channel. But for those of you guys who don't know, if you leave a comment on the HFA podcast YouTube channel, the Wishing We Were Fishing YouTube channel, leave us a question and we'll try to answer them in this podcast. This is the second podcast. So by now, if you're listening to this, you probably could leave a question, but you may not hear it until like the fourth podcast because we haven't even posted the first one yet and we're recording the second podcast. So, but anyways, I picked out this question because I thought it was a good one that me and Andrew could answer. But he says, hey man, I just picked up a digital camera. Do you have any tips on how to get those shots of the fish while making sure you don't drop your camera, as well as making sure the fish is staying in good condition? So I think me and Andrew both do this, but we don't take photos of the fish. We take video and then take screenshots or screen grabs of the video, because we found that's the best way to do what we need to do and not harm the fish. So what we do is we usually carry oversized nets. I've seen people leave comments like, why do you have such a big net? You know, like you're catching little fish. It's pointless. But we carry oversized nets so we can essentially create like a live well for the fish. So what we do if we hook like a 20-inch brown is we have an oversized net that carries a 20-inch brown trout pretty easily in a perfect world. And we essentially keep the fish totally in the water. So the whole time that we're getting the camera set up, the fish is sitting there and kind of reviving itself, so to speak, in the current, ideally. And we just set the camera up on the bank. I use my camera bag a lot. I'll just take the camera out of the bag, lay the bag down, set the camera up, turn it on. The cameras we have a little screen, so I can turn the screen around. So like if it's pointing me, I can see what I'm looking or see what the camera's shooting. And then we just record it. Our cameras record in 4K. So we just record video of the fish. And we usually, we'll be like, all right, guys, so here's the fish. So while we're showing the fish off for the video, you'll see us like every once in a while just like hold the fish and just smile. And then we keep going. That one split second of us smiling is what we use to take a screenshot, which is then the pictures that you might see on Instagram or wherever you might see it. So essentially, the fish is usually out of the water for less than 10 seconds, maybe less than 5. It depends. It can be in the water for almost no time, just long enough to make sure that the camera's in focus, everything's good, and then put the fish back in the net. And then at that point, you could just release it too if you wanted to.
And also, I'll add that I have a tiny like tripod. I don't know how you call that type of thing.
Yeah.
Just a tiny tripod with like bendable legs to it, so I can like put it on like on a rock, and I can like bend the legs and just kind of set the camera up like that, because it is very tough. If you don't have anything at all, it's almost impossible to put up the camera on the bank of a creek, because it'll always be crookeder than a dog's leg. So
yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. Yeah, but
you're just like, not really.
I mean, no, I mean, it is kind of true. I think it's more true out. A lot of the creeks that I fish out east, there's usually some amount of elevation right on the bank, so it's pretty easy for me to set my camera up and have a pretty good shot of the fish. But I see what you're saying for sure. But overall,
well, I was just answering the question some more too, just saying I have a, it's just a pinnable legged tripod that we can screw in to the bottom of our cameras too, to help with getting the shot that we want. So
yeah, for sure. I would say altogether that doesn't take us more than like less than 10 seconds to get the camera out of the bag, set up. It's recording. We make sure everything's in focus. Like the whole deal doesn't take that long. And the whole time the fish is able to revive or sit in the water and relax. So by the time we release the fish, it usually kicks off and takes off running away from us because it's like, hey, you insane person, why have you caught me? But yeah, so that's the answer to that. We don't take photos. We take screenshots of video because we think that's the easiest / most like ethical way to do it, to be honest with you, because if you're taking photos, it can be difficult. And then the next question, we're only going to do 2 questions. The next question is, do you prefer to fish streamers upstream or downstream? So, Andrew, go for it.
Well, I would say you'd always start off fishing streamer. Well, it's kind of worded weird. You want to fish it to where the streamer is being worked downstream, or you're bringing it downstream.
Cast upstream, bring it downstream.
Yeah, cast upstream, bring it downstream. Just because obviously that's the most natural. If a fish is injured, it isn't kind of be swimming up the creek.
Correct.
So you always start off that way, and also it's much easier to hook a fish if you're bringing it downstream and it eats it compared to jigging it up the creek. It's very tough to hook a fish like that.
Correct.
Because you're always pulling it out of the fish's mouth compared to in towards the mouth of the fish. So I'd always say park the streamer downstream. I mean, sometimes it is effective to park it upstream. I've caught many brown trout doing that, but there's times for that, and I'm sure we'll have to dive deep into that on a whole like streamer episode or something.
I was gonna say we could talk about this and all the intricate details of why you should do what you should do. It would take us another hour. So yeah, generally, as Andrew said, cast upstream, bring it downstream. I think the old adage is like at a 45-degree angle is like the most ideal, because if you're just bringing it directly downstream, it's kind of hard to work them. So yeah, just work the streamer downstream. As Andrew said, work the streamer downstream, and then like as you're leaving the hole, if you're walking up the creek or river, just like let it swing through and bounce it around a few times just to make sure something doesn't just want it dangled in front of their face. But generally, almost every really big fish we've ever caught has been worked downstream to catch the fish. So that's what we prefer. So anyways, all right. Looks like we've been going for like an hour and 23 minutes. So I'd say that's long enough for our second podcast. Let's see. Let's wrap it up. Let's see. Upcoming trips. What do we have? I don't really have anything planned for like the next month or 2. I'm just going to be muskie fishing my butt off. At this point, the Muskie Hunt episode 1 has been posted. Episode 2 is edited and ready to be posted. And episode 3 has been filmed.
This podcast that came out, episode 2 will be out.
At this point, the Muskie episode 2 is out. And probably Muskie episode 3 is out. But as we're recording this, Muskie episode 1 is the only one that's out. I've got 3 muskie this year, and my goal is to catch at least 20 before I hit the summertime when the temps start to get up there. So maybe we'll even get Andrew in on the action here when he comes in here out east in June. But the other big trips I have coming up is that I'm going to be starting the Western Native Trout Challenge, which, if you guys don't know what that is, it's where you catch every trout native to the Western U.S. in their native water. So like the first fish I'm going to be going to catch is going to be the Gila trout in New Mexico and the Apache trout in Arizona. And then I'm going to work my way north and go to Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, Idaho, Montana. Did I say Montana? Oregon, Washington, California, Nevada. How do you say it? Nevada or Nevada? Nevada. Andrew told me that when he went out to Nevada, that if you don't say Nevada, then they don't like that much. But yeah. And then we have to do Alaska, but Alaska might not be for till next year. Let's be honest. I probably won't be able to finish even the contiguous, or that's not the right word, is it?
Yeah.
Is it? I might not even be able to finish US. Like The contiguous U.S. Yeah, I probably won't even get finished with that because California is tough. So, because there's so many ones in California, and unfortunately, when me and Andrew went and did the California series, it doesn't count. Like you can't retroactively count fish you've caught. Once you register for the challenge, you have to restart.
We should have started it then because we did it,
dude.
We caught it.
I am not hiking
the most purest native strain we could have caught.
Oh, dude, I do want to do that again, but I'm going in on horseback this time. Also, I'm not hiking 22 miles.
A comment how mad people get about calling the
Palomino trout, golden trout,
Eastern golden trout.
Dude, we've had content go viral specifically on Facebook and Instagram because when I'm fishing in the stocked waters in West Virginia, occasionally I'll run into a Palomino trout. It's just like a whacked up, weird looking stock trout. But out east, we call them golden trout. We just do. It's how we were brought up. It's how we were told. We were told from the second we were tiny children that they're golden trout. So like I will look at them and I just out of reaction, I'll be like, oh, look, there's a golden trout. And then I try to catch it. And then,
then I don't get why people get
100 comments telling me that it's not a golden trout. And that, in fact, the golden trout is only native to California. I'm like, dude, I know. I've been to California. I caught them.
We've done the whole videos on it.
Dude,
like 20 miles to catch it.
Yes, go back on my Instagram or do any just vague amount of research, and you'll know that I know exactly what a native golden trout is, and I know that what I'm catching is a stock trout.
Well, it's just like that's what we call them out there, and if you called them anything else, people would be like, "What are you talking about? It's a golden trout," you know?
Yes, dude. It's like the stupid
just what it is out there. Like it's called the Gold Rush in West Virginia. They have a whole thing
in West Virginia. I literally got an email from the West Virginia DNR that's like the Gold Rush is going to get started. Catch your once in a lifetime golden trout catch in the stocked waters in West Virginia next week. I'm like, dude. You know, if I went to the local tackle shop and said I want to catch a Palomino trout, they'd be like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about, brother. So it's kind of like this stupid like steelhead debate where like if I post a video from Erie and I say I caught a steelhead, like I'm getting comments right now that are people telling me that that's not a steelhead and it's a rainbow trout because it didn't touch salt, no steel. And I'm like, brother, we all know you're not teaching anybody a lesson. But they are legally called steelhead in the state of Pennsylvania. I don't talk to someone else. I don't care.
Well, I just think it's funny too. And I even saw like somebody else reposted your one clip of you catching a golden trout, and I don't know who the like page even is. They probably just like stole the video or something, but they posted it and I like clicked on the comments and every comment was like, that's not a golden trout, idiot. I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's just people that like don't know that we know, and also I don't know, it's like
it's just something too that if you're not from the east there, then you just don't know too. Like, well, then you're just like thinking that this idiot here is calling a golden trout something it isn't. It's like, well, you haven't been to the east coast then and fished in those places where that's what it is.
You want to know something even funnier? So in California, I had a bunch of people message me or leave comments or whatever. In California, they call the stocked Palomino trout, they call them lightning trout, apparently.
Oh, I like
so like people from California are like, they're like, that's a lightning trout. That's not a golden trout. And I'm like, well, that's a new one. I haven't heard anybody call them a lightning trout, but it makes sense because they can't call them golden trout in California because they have legitimate golden trout.
Yeah.
So yeah, I found that interesting too. But
sorry, I don't know how I even got at that, but I thought it was funny. But you can continue with what you're saying. The Western Native Trout Challenge, the muskie episodes.
I've got muskie episodes ready. They're coming out. I'm supposed to be muskie fishing tomorrow with my buddy Jarrett. I don't know how it's going to go. I'm fishing a section of river below a set of falls. that there's actually a YouTube video that went pretty viral of a guy catching a bunch of them a few years ago out of this particular area. So I'm going to try it. I don't really have that much confidence in it, but can't catch them if you're sitting in the house or sitting on the couch or whatever the saying is. And then I'm going to be fishing for muskie with Micah this weekend. He's getting his John boat out, so that'll be fun. We'll probably fish some bigger water and try to catch a bigger fish. So that should be cool. And then, yeah, I think that's it. Do you got any trips planned, Andrew?
I don't have any trips planned.
Are you going to go with me to New Mexico?
I think so. It depends on when it is and what I have going on. Like, I don't plan on actually taking any time off to do it. If it happens and I can drive out there on Friday evening or whatever and fish for the weekend, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the plan for that, because I would like to catch them. And then other than that, I really don't have any trips planned or like a major trip planned until our Idaho Bull Trout trip here in the summer. So
yes, sir. All right. So yeah, I guess that's going to end this episode of Wishing We Were Fishing. I guess I'm supposed to tell you to leave a review on Apple or Spotify or however you review podcasts, because it helps us a lot. And I'm saying that because I've heard other people say it, not because I have any idea of what metric works on any of the platforms outside of YouTube. So if you enjoyed the podcast, do whatever you got to do to let us know that you enjoyed the podcast. And yeah,
if you don't enjoy it, tell us something we could do to make it better.
Yes, please. Don't just be like, hey,
criticism.
Yeah, well, I don't want to hear something that's like, hey, dude, this podcast blows. It's like, that means nothing to me. Imagine listening to it, listening to a podcast for an hour and a half just to comment, this podcast blows, dude. But yeah, anyways, I think we're going to end it here. So we will catch you on the next episode of Wishing We Were Fishing.
Woo!
Okay, we're done.